Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing When Harry Met Sally, directed by Rob Reiner, Memories of a Murder by Bong Joon-ho, Nobody by Ilya Naishuller, and newly released Belle, directed by Mamoru Hosoda, and Nightmare Alley by Guillermo del Toro. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
It's going really well. And how was your week of movies, man?
Week of movies was good. Around the world in just an intro with all those director names. Excellent.
Yeah, we have a lot of different directors from a lot of different places.
Absolutely. And thematically, a little bit of a tough matching. There's a lot here that maybe doesn't have ties together. Wanted to maybe incorporate some things together. It didn't work out like that, but excited to talk about nearly all of these movies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we might have some heavy hitters, too. Mm-hmm. With that being said, do we want to start?
Sure, absolutely.
And let's start with a very famous movie we have directed by Rob Reiner, When Harry Met Sally.
Yes. Okay. So this movie, it was on my radar for... I honestly don't know why. I was trying to look back to one of my many lists, and I think this could have been on here because I was pretty hot on when we watched Misery not too long ago.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that, of course, was directed by Rob Reiner. Possibly this landed on my radar on one of my lists for the editing tricks. There's a lot of split-screen editing that I'll obviously talk about in just a little bit when we get into the review. But yeah, I nonetheless very happy to watch this film. Definitely a lead-in into some of the type of films that we're going to be watching in February, diving into some more vintage, some more rom-com stuff. So excited for that.
Yeah, and I also think this is just a good one to get onto the site. To have the daily ratings, I think this is definitely a film that should be on there. A lot of people know it. Rob Reiner, famous, and this is one of his most famous movies of that as well.
Absolutely.
So I love that you put it on this list here for this week.
Yeah. This is, for folks at home, this is a movie where Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan are kind of met together in serendipitous circumstances. They go their separate ways, and overall we see their relationship both in friendship and romantically evolve over many, many years. It's in that evolution over time that I think this film really, it does a great job showing the evolution, and our characters, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan, do a great job at showing that evolution in their roles as well. And that's where I think the cornerstone of where I'm coming back with this review, where does this separate itself from the pack of the many, many rom-coms out there? How does this separate itself from the pack, So
you would definitely say that. I mean, they're just coming off as very believable characters. They look like they look believable, realistic in the real world, kind of like you can see that.
The dialogue's super sharp. I like how they evolve as characters, specifically in their roles over time.
Oh, so the way the characters were written was very good. Okay,
in the story, many years pass over this, and both of them are creating development in their characters.
Okay, I gotcha. Sure, yeah,
it's really good. Chemistry on screen, I would say it's a bit odd for a romance. It's kind of the point of the story, but when it comes to why this works, I think it works because there is really a breakneck pace to this dialogue, and both of our leads are really keeping up with this. Script is incredibly sharp. I think everyone is really on point with their delivery, especially Billy Crystal, that his style, his just normal way of speaking are a very high cadence. On this, it's just a perfect match because they're both in New York. They're both developing over the years in their own careers as well. So it's a really good match that they're able to both give it and take it as far as dialogue goes.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And really nice to see them always on screen. And it boils down to a very simple fact that if a rom-com is going to be about our two main leads, they are a delight to see on screen. So
yeah, that's huge right
it's
there.
Good stuff, yeah. I also enjoy the film for some cuts when it goes away from our main romance. Throughout the film, there will be real relationship interview segments of long-term sweethearts, high school relationships that have lasted for years and years and years. And the film cuts to that frequently. I enjoy it just because it breaks up things. I would have liked it maybe to be tied thematically with where our characters are on screen and maybe what story is called back to when. But it really nice stuff that is cut to because it's enjoyable seeing real life relationships and then diving into this story. It's a good pairing.
Would you say where it worked in the film and you enjoyed seeing it, it just could have been more connected to the film in a better way? Like it did work, but maybe it could have worked even better.
Yeah, I think out of the however many interviews in production of this, if you took the real interviews and then paired them thematically with what the characters are going through, depending on what stage or how many years have progressed in the story, I think there could have been some pairing where some of these they're very cute, but they just kind of come out of nowhere, and maybe it's a little distracting. But again, I'm not criticizing it too much because I did enjoy their inclusion in the film.
It was a net positive for the film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it could have been used a little bit more strategically, and I'm not saying I'll alter what the real life relationships are talking about.
Right.
The stories that's really the best part about it. Just some more interesting pairing. So let's go ahead and talk about Billy Crystal a little bit. He is great in this. I think as far as his quick talking, his again, I really would describe it as breakneck pace to the dialogue. Really great. I think he's great specifically in this role because we see him as a provoker of Meg Ryan. He's always the prodder when it comes to trying to push her in certain ways and get her to react in certain ways, and it's
a bit of the instigator, yeah.
Exactly, and I think to the character, the audience can actually care about him in this way for where his role evolves in the story, because again the story evolves in multiple years. I forget how many years. It's either 7, 8, or 11. I feel like I've watched a couple things that are blurred together, but it really good. Oddly enough, though, the standout is Meg Ryan.
She is a powerhouse in like
so
this
good.
80s and 90s time.
Yeah.
She's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, she's with Tom Hanks in so many movies,
sure.
and she's a powerhouse. Is the best way to describe her in this time.
And I mean, if I had to put money or a coin flip on who I would have liked more going into this, I absolutely would have said Billy Crystal. Meg Ryan really is the best of this.
That's awesome to hear.
She takes this evolution over multiple years, and she really runs with that as far as her character evolving, how she reacts to situations, and obviously where the relationship goes.
Okay, sure.
That's friendship or romance. Just a really good standout, and I think as far as how she's killing the both comedic and dramatic elements, I have to say, I mean, she gets the credit for why I think this works as a rom-com that stands above the rest.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Back to my original note with some of the split-screen editing, I think, once again, I'm looking for where this stands above the rest, where in the massive catalog of romantic comedies that you could watch, it's kind of hard from a critical perspective to say, oh, well, I prefer this actor versus this, or I prefer where the romance goes with this. I think that's getting too in the weeds and that's not going to lead to consistent criticism on my part.
Okay, sure.
Where I'm going into this is looking into what type of visual storytelling is happening on screen? What are the gimmicks or what are the unique aspects to the film? And in this film specifically for When Harry Met Sally, we have these split screen sequences that visual comedy is being put forward. We see both characters in different places on screen, but acting at the same time and playing off each other. And it's very enjoyable to watch. I would say there's probably 2 to 3 main times that these sequences come up that characters will be, it's quite literally picture in picture. There is a split screen on the film, and where you have that dialing in of why I think it's so enjoyable is we are seeing both characters have a monologue-like environment or monologue platform to act and show the development of their roles. And they're both on screen at the same time and really going off of each other. These are almost, I believe, all happen over phone calls, which makes sense. But really, I think if that in combination with Meg Ryan's specific performance, I think the film itself really has some interesting sequences this way, and that's what, once again, where I'm dialing into why this stands above, the huge
and what separates
herd.
it stands above and separates it. And if you have a good character writing, good actors to play those characters, and you have uniqueness in the film that can stand it apart, that's a very good recipe.
Absolutely. I think with that, I'm coming into this very positive. Where it stands apart, I think there has to be some sort of visual flair and uniqueness when it comes to that, and I think this film definitely checks that box. These split scene sequences are really, some of the most entertaining parts of the film, and that's what leads me into, how does this film sell the story? These sequences, they sell a visual comedy, they sell a platform for our actors to really be in their own and show how the role is evolving and the story is evolving, and that results in a very, very warm score from me. We're going to go ahead and give When Harry Met Sally a 74.
Oh, okay, 74. Very good score. I was almost maybe thinking you were going to give it higher.
Yeah.
What maybe say doesn't quite get into the 80s? Was it just the overall story? Was it just...
I think it's a temperature for me that I say, wow, everyone's got to see this. You know what I mean? I think that's what is one of the biggest questions on my mind of whether it's cracking into the 80s or not. The must-watch ability of it, if you will.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
And that's where I think it falls short a little bit. And again, I think. Not that it's a huge criticism, but these cuts away to real life characters or real life relationships.
Yeah.
I think there could have been some thematic pairing, a little bit more strategic with that.
Okay, but overall, very enjoyable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, fantastic! All right.
Also, secret Christmas movie. Because of multiple years, but yeah, Christmas comes up a bunch.
That's going to be a great compilation, maybe, to put on the site. Just secret Christmas movie. Be a great compilation to do up there.
I now mark it in my notes as just SC.
Pretty good.
And I move on.
Awesome. 74, Harry Met Sally. All right, so we're going to keep on going here, and we're going to jump from 89 to 2003, and we're going to go with Memories of a Murder, and this is directed by, a very much...
A rising star on the ratings.
We're very much enjoying his films. This is Bong Joon-ho, who we know and most of the world knows from Parasite, and we also had previously reviewed...
The Host.
Right, The Host. And so where does this come in during his release dates? Like, is this after The Host, before The Host?
This is before The Host, if I'm correct. I think Host was 2006. This is 2003. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the Host 2006, Memories of a Murder 2003. So this is early Bong Joon-ho.
Yes.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, with how hot I've been on his movies, once again, similar type of genre balancing that I think he's known for. I mean, I think it goes beyond a motif. It is really a trademark of his style. Folks at home, this is a movie of... I believe it's partially a true story, not with the specific detectives involved, but this is a serial killer thriller that is partially a true story off of a series of murders in the late 80s in rural South Korea. Very Zodiac-like for that reason.
Ah, okay.
And I'd be interested to see maybe just that early 2000s, maybe just, killer thrillers. Maybe it was just super
It was
hot.
it was in the air.
Yeah, it was just in the air. Interesting how things come around like that. But as the years progress in the story, I think it kind of blurs the lines of this is a story about the murders that Bong wants to tell to maybe being a little bit more of a critique of police at the time. And there's some interesting things that this film does. There's a lot of juggling act with all of his films, but one thing that I want to introduce as some of the opening notes with this, the rural setting here almost has a character in its own, and it casts our detectives in a very interesting light. Sometimes as competent, and sometimes as brutal, out of touch, and almost self-sabotaging for that reason. I think that is probably the most interesting part about this film, because I honestly don't know the historical context of what South Korea was going through in late 80s to early 90s. But there seems to be a story that the film will cut away to show civil unrest. The film very much puts a spotlight on brutal detective methods throughout the whole film, and it's not necessarily a story, but there is an underlining that I think this film means something for South Koreans that I couldn't grab an appreciation for, but it's definitely
in the present. It's definitely present and coming across.
Absolutely.
Was it trying to get across an agenda, or trying to get across a point, basically, or highlight something that was going on in the country at the time?
I think it's highlighting, the setting, that's where it ties back to me calling the setting a character. Rural South Korea in the late 80s is pretty damn rural, you know what I mean?
Right.
This is I wouldn't go so far to say third world country, but this is small town stuff. So where it ties into that, I think that is very intentional, and I think that just plays into how the setting is defining our characters more than any other normal setting would. I think there's definitely some intention behind that. Once again, though, Bong's natural knack for comedy here is great. I am stunned with what he's able to do with telling a story and just having comedy infused with it, interweaved with it. And believe me, don't get me wrong, it is not like this is funny for an Asian film, or this is very a South Korean type of comedy. It's visual comedy. It's
cross-culture that way.
Anyone could laugh at this because I think it is genuinely funny.
This is what you love so much about Edgar Wright as well.
Absolutely.
He's so good at just visual comedy, where it doesn't matter what culture you're from or what film. Film is so different per country.
Oh, for sure.
It's great that you have this through line, and he's great at connecting with those audiences.
Right. And maybe I'm hyper aware of it too, because comedy in Japanese films and in some South Korean films can be so guarded. It can be such a barrier for Western audiences.
Okay.
In addition to the language, are you grasping how a line is delivered?
Yes,
or comedic timing.
The fact that it's just the fact that it's lost in subtitles, and it's you are taken away out of a movie somewhat, and you're focused on something else that's not typical. It's not exactly the easiest thing to do.
Exactly.
But visual comedy,
anyone can get behind it.
Right.
It's cross-cultural, and I think once again he hits the nail on the head with this. There is a running gag of a flying jump kick in these interrogation sequences, and where it goes with the film is, it's so good. He just has such a knack for it, and it's really something to see that it's present almost in every film. And I think as we revisit more, or not revisit, but as I dive into more of Bong's movies, I'm just so ecstatic to see if it keeps up across the board. Is it truly his trademark?
Okay, yeah.
Of this balance.
I love that the DNA is there even back in 2000. Like we were surprised. You were surprised to see in The Host in 2006 how much of Parasite, the best parts about Parasite, are in The Host.
Yep.
And it's even 3 years earlier than that, which is very cool.
And maybe that's just him refining it over years and really dialing it in. But it's absolutely there. So it cross off that box. That is 100% here. Let's talk about some of the performances. A usual, I would say, almost his go-to actor, Kang Ho Song, is incredible. This is the dad from Parasite, in case you don't know, and hard to keep track of some of these actors, of course. He was was in Host, he's in this, and always proves he's not afraid to take on roles all over the map, all over the spectrum, whether it is a cool detective, whether it is a idiot shopkeeper, the list goes on. I would almost compare this to, I mean, this is kind of top of mind just because we're coming off of last week, but almost like a Philip Seymour Hoffman, that there's no barrier to the type of roles that he's taking. It's not that it's lack of pride, it's more so he's excited to take on different things. And once again, we see with Kang Ho Song a great performance here. Really entertaining.
Wow, that's awesome.
The balance, I mean, if the balance between seriousness and comedy is going to lie with anywhere and be sold by any one actor, it's absolutely with him. So, and I think he's probably the keystone of a lot of Bong's movies. So
that's cool, and it's again, that's a 14-year gap that he's doing these movies with him and everything like that, and just the fact that he's so good on just that. I mean, that's great to see.
Yeah,
that's great to see.
Absolutely. Cinematography, once again, a real big highlight here. The cuts, how long we stay on sequences. No, really, the absence of cuts, the absence of edits. Really, if there is a single reason why this movie should be on your watch list, it is how big crowds are presented. It is how busy scenes are presented. I don't know if it's just because I've been watching a good amount of modern film, but there are so many fast edits in films nowadays, and I like when that's appropriate. I like that when that's, of course, visual storytelling and has an importance to the film itself.
Yeah, of course.
Man, what he decides to just keep the camera hanging on is so entertaining, and really some phenomenal framing, blocking. This is really top notch. One scene in particular is a nightclub that he takes from a very simple argument. You would say almost like a filler, something you get up to go to the bathroom with, and not only is this camera work characterizing our two main actors on screen and showing in visual storytelling the distance they have in their positions, but as the scene comes to a close, we zoom back in, and as his trademark comedy kind of comes into play, diffuses the situation, and we see the frame get closer and closer, bringing our characters together. Really some amazing stuff, and to see this happen in one of his first works of 2003, I mean, yeah, hats off. Really top-notch stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you said also with the cinematography, too, as far as like, you mentioned the Zodiac earlier. Did it have that darker undertone? Was every shot kind of had that bluish or just kind of that darker tone to it? Like, did it have that, did it encapsulate that feel? You know what I mean?
Yeah, darker in subject matter. And that leads me to really my main criticism with it.
Okay. But as far as cinematography, did it have that feel, that look to it, or no?
Yes. And I think that's, again, sold by, I mean, this is out in the boons of South Korea.
Right.
This is out there and really underdeveloped. So there is a paleness to color composition on screen. Definitely kind of selling the age of being late 90s, late 80s. And I think to your point with that, some of the through line there, it does play into the fact that this story of this police work, these detectives, they're understaffed. They're maybe not trained properly because of the rural setting.
Interesting.
And I think that plays into some sort of commentary of not civil unrest, but I don't know the history at the time, and that's why I think with the enjoyment comes into play, that this is a partially true story, fictional characters. Obviously, he's creating this fictional, these characters of the detectives and whatnot. So, but where I want to wrap up is related to the biggest aspect of the thriller of this. What is happening with the drama and the sometimes the horrific things that our detectives are faced with. I think if there's one aspect to hold back this film from truly great, is that the comedy meshes, the genre balancing act, what I've talked about with all his films.
Sure.
It's probably at its weakest here, because it's not that the comedy doesn't work. It's not that the thriller of this, very heavy topics of murder, rape, the actual serial killer aspects of this, both are good independently. But when something is matched together with comedy, it's tough. It's probably at his weakest of the films that I've seen so far, because even with The Host, you have this family comedy being paired against a monster horror, which isn't, it's drastic, but it can make that act. We're flipping from one side being comedic detectives, ragtag detectives, and then a very serious, no less real murder, rape, thriller plot. And it's a little bit jarring for that reason. Yeah, so it's hard to put your finger on this film when you're watching it.
Interesting. So, but it's funny that it's done well, but the balancing of it, or like melding those two together, it's just like so difficult to actually make it right.
Exactly. Both are done independently very well. Both sides of the coin, they stand on their own.
Right.
It's when they come together, and especially the scenes that both are juggled.
It doesn't quite hit.
It doesn't quite hit just because, the stakes on the thriller side are just so serious.
Yeah,
we're talking about, some serious stuff here, no less real events. So it always left me kind of in an interesting spot with it, that was I was almost questioning myself. Was supposed to be taking this comedically? Was I supposed to look at a specific cue or maybe an interaction between characters, how I think it was comedic, but it made me question in between. Maybe that's the brilliance of an early film like this, that he's just figuring that out, and he doesn't maybe know quite the balancing act, but I think more than any other film that I've seen from him so far, it's a tough balance because of the severity of the two directions that's going. Does that make sense?
Of course, absolutely.
So that's what I think really my main critique here. It's not that the genre mashing doesn't work. It's just that this one is pretty severe, and the distance between the two is sometimes a little bit disorienting. That on top of maybe some language barrier, I think that's where I'm coming at, that prevents this movie from really being great. Nonetheless, this is a very good movie. Following through on having these trademarks of Bong be present so early in his works, and not only that, just a phenomenal, entertaining movie with some sharp cinematography work. We're going to go ahead and give Memories of Murder a 76.
76, a great score.
Clock's lower than Host. Definitely clocks lower than Parasite, but still solid.
It's still solid, and his DNA is right there. Wow, it's great. It's great that we found this too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm so great that Parasite brought this guy to light, especially like in more Western market. That's great to see.
And the acting is just like, man, that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to now, because now that I have this through line with watching his work, I'm just excited to see the actors that he grabs again and again, and seeing how he pushes them as a director.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be great to see him keep going. Okay, with that, let's keep going ourselves here, and we're going to go with a movie that came out in 2021, earlier 2021, and we have Bob Odenkirk in a unique role, but it's Nobody.
Yes. Okay. So Nobody, had to let the hype die down on this one. I am a big fan of the director here. I'm not going to even bother. We got through one pronunciation of the name.
Ilya Naishuller.
There we go. A big fan of him from his first film, Hardcore Henry, which was not exactly the best critical movie, but such a good watch with the boys, such a, something you put on and it's just entertaining to watch all the action on screen. So I was really, really excited for this film, but I had to let the hype die down. I had to let it cool off.
Yeah, you were, I saw this before you.
Yes.
I did not see it in theaters. I mean, was it in theaters? Yeah,
I think so.
Barely, but yeah, just because that was more peak kind of pandemic a little bit.
March, yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit more excited. You definitely had your walls up a little bit of it, because it was just like, I think everyone was so excited to see Bob Odenkirk in a role like this. Everyone's still in just like such a John Wick kind of like hype. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of funny that you took your time. I'm glad you got to it though.
Yeah, and HBO Max. Sponsored but not sponsored.
Right.
Easy watch. But I would describe this for folks at home. I mean, this is a movie that elevator pitch here is really dad John Wick. And this goes beyond the style. and motifs that we have in the film, because the same writer, Derek Kolstad, is the same writer of the John Wick series.
Yeah.
I think this plays a little bit more negative for me because it's a little bit been there, done that. And I think as I'll kind of bring it home, I don't see much reason to recommend this movie over a John Wick 1. And it leaves me a little bit difficult of where this is positioned in between.
So, well, my thing is, I mean, you don't want to just hand the torch of this kind of new genre of gung fu over to Keanu Reeves and John Wick, right? I mean, if you explore, if you want to branch, because you're a big fan of gung fu.
Yeah.
I am as well, and more and more
Absolutely.
people are catching on. You want the genre to kind of thrive a little bit. Don't you want to see more and more? Or is it just like, are you saying like the story itself is just like too close?
The story's just a little bit too close.
Okay,
And,
I see. All right.
I mean, even to the point, I don't think it's a huge spoiler, but like he has like gold in his basement and whatnot. There's almost like too much of like, wow, this is really, they're dealing with Russians as the antagonists or as the thugs. It just it strikes a little bit, and almost I would say I think you have a great perspective there. If the genre is thriving, you got to have
content. You have that content rather.
I mean, what did we just talk about with Zodiac and Memories of Murder?
Right.
There's gonna be there can be complementary films that come out.
Well,
it's just from the same guy. That's where I'm landing. Like
same guy, and so much is the same.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit too close.
Exactly.
I don't know, too close to
New
home a little
director,
bit.
and
Sure,
obviously,
yeah.
director would probably love to work in that genre. Hardcore Henry practically was gung fu.
Right.
First person, if you will. So, yeah. So that's where I come at it with. So
it's not so much the style of fighting that's consistent,
Exactly.
and just that, and because then you could.
It's more so the story itself has been there, done that. I'll take more of the fighting any day of the week.
Right, just like when you look at the Raid early on, gung fu.
Right.
Same type of fighting, but
Absolutely.
very, very different story.
Absolutely.
Funny concept. Okay, yeah.
So, let's talk about Bob. Bob takes a while to do anything really badass on screen, but when it gets there, the fighting choreography is right on pace with what you would expect from John Wick, certainly from Hardcore Henry for the director specifically. It is that fight choreography. They are not afraid to let the camera sit on punches. I would say overall, there are a little bit more cuts in the fighting than you would see in a John Wick, but it's also been a while since I've seen that first film.
Okay.
And Tom knows my opinions on how the films progress, so eventually we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll bring some audio to that soon.
Yeah. When 4 comes out, we'll make a whole thing. But I think the whole movie unfolds much, much more slower. We're talking an hour and 30 and change. And I mean, it's pretty much up to the 30-minute mark before we get really our first dose of badassery with Bob.
And is that okay? Like, is the build-up good? Because
I feel like
find it worth it or no?
I would have liked some more done with that time.
More character building?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the character building throughout the whole film, it feels a bit generic as well. He has marital problems, for instance, really emphasizing the dad, John Wick. He has a family at home. A lot of that is just a little bit too shallow for me.
Oh, okay, all right.
And again,
yeah.
we're talking
weak,
about
a little weak.
Yeah, we're talking about an action film here. I mean, this is about the action.
Yeah.
If anything, let's tie that into, well, if it's about the action, well, we're waiting, some time until we get involved into anything serious,
Yeah, for sure.
Like I said, though, fights are solid. They are creative. They are showing. Actually, let me circle back a second. Let me dial this back to Bob's performance. I'm looking at here. I think if this movie is going to stand apart from a John Wick, it's probably going to stand apart on its more humorous segments, which is not a lot, but I think where Bob shines for me is when a little bit of awkward interactions or comedic flashbacks. There's one in particular in the film. It works for me a little bit better when he's being comedic on screen because he really is funny. His line delivery, it's straight face, but it's clearly a funny sequence. That's where his performance really shines. And again, that is my argument. If you are in love with John Wick, or maybe specifically if you have not dived to any of these movies, how does this movie exist in the same ecosystem? I think it's more comedic elements and more of its slow burn elements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the fight work, though. I mean, I think it is very solid, very creative. If there is a mark of this director pairing up with this writer, it is going to be in the more creative, kind of homemade type of action, homemade props to it. There's a lot of ragtag kind of pipe nail bomb work, and really enjoyable for that reason. Very reminiscent of a Hardcore Henry, which I like to see. And I think the best part about it is Bob is not invincible on screen. He gets his ass kicked quite a bit in this, and shows that he's more vulnerable.
Yeah, and there's some separation there from John Wick as well. He's a little bit more invincible, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where John Wick is with Keanu, it's the stakes are there, but it's all gun based. This is all fight based, much more type of beat up scenarios.
Okay,
you know?
using the surroundings, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason, Bob takes a lot more hits, and I think that helps distinguish this from what I've been comparing it to so far. How it's sold is that he's not invincible. Where on the other hand, there's who's gonna argue with John Wick, shooting headshots everywhere. So the edits and the cuts, they are very well done. I would say if there is an enjoyment to that first half before we get really, really into the action, I think that is where some of the best cuts are, because there is some visual comedy being flared in there, and it keeps it very snappy, keeps it well paced.
Okay,
I wasn't really bored to tears, even though we're not in action just yet. It's not exactly, I wouldn't call it as slow burn, because things are going at pretty breakneck pace with that. So, bottom line though, I would say I'm more middle of the road with this one. I don't think it exactly stands apart from its contemporaries or its competitors, however you want to see it. I'm not super hot on the writer kind of making the same kind of storyline, making the same type of it
doesn't sound like you're very excited by it.
Yeah,
and it could be good, like you said from the beginning. Been there, done that a little bit, and a little things are different here or there, which is nice. But overall, it's like okay, yeah.
And when there's callbacks to it, or not callbacks, but when there are similarities down to the same plot points that would be in John Wick, again, I'm not trying to over compare to that,
sure.
But it's his same work,
right?
It's the same dude writing this. I think that's for me. I'm not excited by that on screen. It's almost a disappointment to say, "Oh, okay, we're using the same thing again."
Right, right. No, definitely.
It was more of a disappointment to it, and that's where I'm coming middle of the road. I think on top of that, I was not one to follow Bob Odenkirk's career too much. I think if you love him and want a touch of comedy in your action film, certainly want to see him in a very different role. I think that this film is a great watch for you. I think other than that, we're going to go ahead and give Nobody a 61.
Oh, a 61 score though. I mean, that's still a good movie. You're still in there in a good movie, and I guess. You made a good caveat where if it's specific to you, it'll be go see it and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely interested to see Bob Odenkirk, I think he played the character well.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? Like he actually did a good job at everything.
And the fight choreography. I mean, this is him on screen. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so. I think for some, maybe those Bob Odenkirk fans, whether it's Better Call Saul or whatever, I think this could be their John Wick, especially if they haven't seen the original of it. But
overall, in that genre, if you're looking for that gung or gung fu kind of movie, there's better out there.
I think so, yeah. And that's where I kind of land a little bit more middle of the road. Certainly a good movie, though, and that's where I think it cracks 60 for sure.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Awesome, Vin. So we're going to take some time here. Those were 3 previously released films. Before we get to our next 2, this is where we're going to take our time, and we're just going to do our producer segment. We want to let you all know that, we don't think of you as listeners. Vin and I host the show, and you all are producers of this show, and you can become an official, actual credit producer if you go to thedailyratings.com. You go to the donations tab, and whatever amount of value that you want to go ahead and kick back to us monetarily, we really appreciate it, and that's what gets you that producership for the show. You can write a note along in with your donation. We'll read it during the show. We'll give you a shout-out. And if you want to be anonymous, say you want to be anonymous, and it's kind of building a dialogue with you guys and everything like that. And we all you who help produce, the daily ratings, we just thank you so much. We've been saying, you're the most beautiful people because you really are. We want to stay away from, reading ads constantly that you guys are going to be skipping forward. And, this gives us a direct line to you to have that communication back and forth. It's very meaningful. And we appreciate it. It's thedailyratings.com. Again, go to the donations tab, and we appreciate it. It's what keeps us going. It does take a lot of time and a little bit of money to do this. So anything that you can be $1 if you want.
And it's value for value. We want to, if this is a ratings guide, is this a tool to save you some time or tell you where you should be watching? We want to hear how that value is. We want to hear from you.
And if we're not getting anything from you guys, we understand that maybe we need to do something different on our side,
Absolutely.
because maybe you're not getting value. But, think about how many times you're scrolling through Rotten Tomatoes or an IMDb or something like that, and they all kind of suck anyway.
They blur.
Movie ratings and movie reviews are only so important in your life, and we understand that. But, this is, we like to be more consistent, and, we don't throw ads in your face and everything like that. And it also keeps us, I don't want to say pure, it just keeps us...
I like pure.
It keeps us fair and true.
Yes.
True to what do we think this movie is. Yeah. What does Vin think this movie is. Yeah. What we talked about recently with Don't Look Up was something fishy happened where the critics gushing reviews in the beginning,
and then
up until 2 or 3 weeks after, and then the critic reviews finally got bad. How is Netflix in the pocket of them just to get Netflix numbers up? There's there's all kinds of crap being played around. And this kind of this is more bare bones, back to the basics. No one's telling us what to say, how to feel about a movie. It's very real. And again, we think it's consistent because the standards are the same when watching a film. So that's enough of that, but that's kind of what we are, how we're doing this. And to you producers, again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Now let's move on to our now in theaters, now playing films. And we're going to start with the first one here. We have Belle, directed by Mamoru Hosoda.
Yes.
And Vin, what do we have with this film here?
So I was really excited for this. Studio Chizu, I believe it is, and Mamoru Hosoda. I love his movies. I think he's had the crown of the next Studio Ghibli, if you will, for a long time, since probably the late 2000s to early 2010s. And the fact that I saw a mainline film like this not be on a limited run of a release, but no less taking the IMAX slot for a lot of theaters first week of January, and you can say, what is first week of January?
Sure.
But an IMAX slot, no less for this. I was very excited and very enthusiastic for this studio, seeing the opportunities.
Yeah, it's great that the platform's getting bigger and bigger. I mean, like you said, they came out with, if any of you were kind of at least in the anime world or have a little knowing, this guy did The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Summer Wars, Wolf Children, they're pumping out really good product, really good material.
Absolutely. And as Studio Ghibli, I would probably say the undisputed kings of anime feature films, as the quality there has waned a little bit for whatever reason you want to associate that, Hosoda and team have really stepped up and created some very unique and interesting experiences. Unfortunately, this movie comes off much more simple, much more straightforward, and I want to bring it up because while I may be not super happy with a few things for the critiques that I'll get into, I think this very well could be the case that's just plain for just a younger demographic. I think this could be under what I was expecting. Both for development, both for the particularities of how this world that he creates works. And
so, what age group would you say it was meant for? I mean, it just makes me think of
Pixar. The
characters
are in high school, but I guess that means nothing. I mean, everything's in high school with anime.
So, that's true. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the story comes up much more simple. The elevator pitch here basically is there is a digital world, almost iconic with his work because it's pretty much exactly what you would see in Summer Wars. There
Right,
is
right.
a real world story, and then there is a digital world story. This is identical in that. Part of what I am kind of blah on is that unlike Summer Wars and unlike some of his other works or the studio's other works, it lacks an evolution, it lacks a depth to that digital world, and it's just taken so kind of straight-faced, and what it really boils down to is an anime Beauty and the Beast. That really is what this story boils down to, and that's where this younger demographic thing is coming up in my mind. You know?
It's interesting though, because like compared to a Pixar where kids and adults can watch those and love them for different reasons. I mean, old Disney and things like that, original Beauty and Beast. It's absolute love there for a kid and for an adult. Where is the separation there? Where was it lacking where it's not necessarily meant for adults? Or where was it lacking for you where you had that separation there? You know what I mean?
It's definitely in the digital world side of it. You look at Summer Wars where there are economic implications to the world of what's going on with that. None of that care is put into the digital world. It's quite literally just we have a real world rom-drom, and we have a very flashy IMAX driven digital world that boils down to Beauty and the Beast, and kind of uninspired for that reason.
Interesting. So kind of the depth or the stakes where maybe that would be lost with the kids, but where the adults would be picking up more on that and enjoying it. That's what's lacking.
Exactly.
It's kind of,
and I think you hit the nail on the head of what truly would make a children's film great is that enjoyment across demographics.
I think it could go either way. Because if a children's film meant for a children's film, it's just what makes you can have a perfectly fine children's film that's very, very good, not good for adults. It's those ones that are exceptional that it's crossed through the ages.
Absolutely.
And much like kind of the original Beauty and Beast and things like that, those are cross-generational.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I don't know. I think my expectations kind of shot me in the foot here because I was seeing this big release, excited for anything that comes out of that studio as far as work. But, that's where I'll get into some of the criticism. Like I said, this movie is split down the middle, folks, for a real-world story following, I believe, a character named Suzu. Typical anime, high school romance, awkward type of comedy. The comedy works. I think it's a little bland in parts, but, who am I to judge with that type of stuff? I think the comedy is the best part about it because there is some very fun interactions between our characters, and I think that's what really sells that side of the story, the real-world plot of it. It feels like it's done many times before. Not that that's bad, but kind of been there, done that, which maybe is a little bit of a theme emerging in this episode. I will say the animation itself is obviously gorgeous in this real world segment, and it's a highlight for me because there is so much an abundance of CGI in the digital world.
I bet.
It's just like, it's not what I'm watching anime for. Get the CGI out of my anime.
It's weird to say, kind of. But yeah.
It's not what I'm watching it for, and boy, if I could have an IMAX experience of something like Summer Wars, where the digital world is just as animated as the real world.
Sure.
I was really hoping for that. Of course, I was expecting some CGI, and obviously digital editing is in the production of anime by these days, but it was just...
it's overkill, saturated.
Yeah, a highlight of the real-world plot, definitely a negative of that digital world plot, and let's go ahead and jump into that a little bit. Like I said, the story boils down to a very surface level Beauty and the Beast. It's almost there for... I was just so confused by it because it's an analog of Beauty and the Beast. It's not per se bad, but it's just so surface level, and I think this is all accentuated. It's all magnified by just bad CGI. I was not a fan of the style of how this looks. And that is a huge, huge problem if these segments are going to be the pitch, the selling point behind why this is an IMAX experience. Why is this IMAX eye candy? If the designs, if the look of the CGI is just so safe, and if I really want to be critical, so uninspired.
It's kind of a shame because, and it's exactly what you summed it up in the very beginning, where it just kind of fell flat. Like it just,
yeah.
And I wonder what the
and
cause of
clearly
that
this
was.
is an IMAX experience. There, you know what I mean?
So was the story there, and the anime and just
Not
other
really.
things fell, or just like it?
And I believe me, I can have
all.
I can have no story if the anime is gorgeous. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I would say a lot of anime features have nonsensical story, but it's a visual feast. This is lacking both, and it's lacking that in just some really bland designs. That on top of CGI, I just did not like the digital world at all. And this is supposed to be the real pitch behind why this is an IMAX experience. You know?
Oh, is that right? Like that's okay.
It's supposed to be this like beautiful, colorful, practically a music video in some parts, but I just felt it was just very safe. And none of the visual flair, again, we see in the director's same work of Summer Wars, where there is such care put into how this digital world operates, how it works when, maybe most importantly, our camera or our viewpoint isn't on in the digital world, that it's living and breathing on its own. So much of this film feels like the digital world are just very bland avatars waiting for our characters to pop in and log in. And I don't feel like that works that well because there's little stakes, there's little impact, and again, it's just this Beauty and the Beast type of analog, and it just
doesn't work.
Very bland. Yeah,
yeah,
just extremely bland. And I would say if I had to narrow or dial in where that blandness really hurts the experience is, again, if this digital world, even CGI or not, is supposed to be the visual eye candy, the designs here do not stand up to, I would say, any other work from Studio Chizu, especially Summer Wars, which is identical in concept.
Man, I wonder what was going on. It makes you wonder.
My least favorite note is COVID production. I don't know.
Sure, but it's anime.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting to say. I mean, that would be. I don't get how you would lack there.
Yeah, I don't know. But either way, again, that's where my main critique of it is that if any of you have watched Summer Wars or even some of the earlier works when Hosoda was on his own, and maybe when we finally put audio to those reviews, I would love to dive into some of his earlier works before he had the studio behind him. Lack of creativity, blandness. Those are the farthest words of how I would describe those films.
Okay,
the fact that is the tip of my tongue of how I would describe the digital world. I think that's a big problem, and no less in an IMAX experience. So, again, I think my viewpoint was pretty up there, or my hype was pretty up there. So I definitely wanted to keep it in check, but I could not get past just like how
it's just that's a shame.
It's just I'll give you a specific, especially for anyone that has seen it. There's like a police force. There's like a basically they have to stop the love of Beauty and the Beast in this, and they're just like bad Power Rangers. Like, it's not anything even unique. When you go to Summer Wars and like there's a mix of Buddhism in the visuals, and there's like a spiritual element, there's economics, and it's bland, very bland.
It fell short is what it sounds like, big time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But bottom line, I find it confusing. I find it very confusing, I should say, of how the digital world plays into this story, the type of story that's being played, and how much just a missed opportunity a story like this in 2022. How much a story of being on phones and avatars beyond yourself and the freedom and what that could bring for characters, especially socially awkward characters, a Japanese market, none of that is brought home. And instead it boils down to romance in the real world, romance in the digital world. And with that, I especially coming from the director of Summer Wars, not only, keeping my expectations in check, I just think there was just such a dropped ball with this. I am very ecstatic that this studio is able to get an IMAX slot in theaters in the U.S. with Japanese language. This is not, I don't believe it's English dub yet. So hats off, great. I'm going to be supporting it from a monetary sense, but he has so much better in his filmography, and
it's a shame because with a big release like that, you want it to be.
Oh yeah, you want it to be lightning.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you have teenagers in your life, especially girls, this would be a great watch in the theaters. Give that theater experience a shot because the music and the visual spectacle, it is there despite those kind of bland designs that I was harping on. But I think for the rest of you, we are going to go ahead and give Belle a 46.
Ooh, 46, yeah.
Yeah, disappointing, but certainly allow me to say, give anything else from Studio Chizu a shot.
Yeah, so take your teens and tweens, but don't expect for you to have a good time.
Exactly. There's no depth for daddy and mommy.
Okay. That's a shame to see. That really is.
Yeah.
Especially because of that big release. It's like, you really want it to hit because then, the likelihood of him, you get so many chances.
I know, yeah.
At that kind of stuff. And
again, I can't stress enough that those opportunities, it's not coming out of nowhere. That depth was in other works, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, such an open season for a digital story in 2022. I mean, this is the start of the year. I think there could have been something really creative cracked here, but just none of it boils down to just very straightforward. Maybe that's not a problem for you, but it was nothing that I was really raving about for me.
Okay, well, for our last film here, let's see if we can turn it around. So this is based off of the 1946 book. This is in theaters now. We have Nightmare Alley, some big casts. And what do we have with this one, at least?
Yeah, so Nightmare Alley, you're right, big cast. This is Del Toro's return after winning the Oscar for Shape of Water. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely his cast is coming from people trying to not jump on the bandwagon, but they're excited with what Del Toro can do. And I'm so happy because, Del Toro is the type of director that just absolutely bleeds, lives and dies for making movies. The art, the fantasy of making movies. We see this in his set design. We see this in his practical effects, and we see this in him coming into this story. This is like Tom, you said, it was an original book. There is also I believe a 1937 adaptation of that of the book.
I don't know if it would be 37 because the book came out in 46, I believe.
Okay, so then it was probably 47.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah,
and honestly, folks at home, I tried to find the movie. It was not from my research. It wasn't licensed by like a Criterion or anything like that. I was going to originally pair that. Maybe that's something to revisit, but the bottom line, you do not need to watch that film for the enjoyment of this film, and if anything, this film is very, very different. I'd be curious more so of its interpretation of the novel. We have, of course, Bradley Cooper in our lead here, despite the huge cast that is there. I would not call this an ensemble movie. This is Bradley's main, he is number one.
He's the shining star.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is a film, very stream of conscious in Bradley's character that goes from rags to riches with this circus theme, this turn of the century type of circus theme around it or setting. I think for this reason, if I had to pair a director with this concept, Del Toro's a perfect match because the practical effects work, usually that would be put into maybe a character design for Shape of Water, what he even got some Oscar nominations for, or rather his team. This is now not going into necessarily character props. It is now all being driven into the setting and the set pieces, and it is a gorgeous film for that reason. Even when we progress past the circus into a more modern Art Deco of the time type of city feel to it, the noir feel of it. Yeah. It is gorgeous. His set work, oh my God, just so beautiful to look at, so much care put into lighting. But again, I think all of that normal probably budget that he allocates for maybe a creature design is now into the actual, the walls, the feel of these scenes.
That's great to hear because it almost had like a polished. It had like a polished look to it that sometimes CGI gives it that isn't good to see. I had this problem with the Hobbit movies actually, where it just had this look to it where it almost like looked fake, it looked CGI, and almost from watching the trailer, which I mean it's just a trailer, but watching the trailer for this, I was getting those vibes, kind of. Yeah. But it's good to hear that it's not really the case.
Yeah,
actually, the exact opposite. It sounds like.
Yeah, the lighting is really dramatic. I totally get what you mean. If anything, sticking it with kind of noir, it felt like those early 2000s films. It's probably a bad example. I think of Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow, where like they have this CGI lighting that just looks terrible and just terribly dates the film.
Okay, you lost me on that one, but I'm there.
It has that kind of look, but it's being done well. That's basically
right.
And it's followed through upon well.
And to the set itself was good too.
Yes.
Which surprised me. I don't know why it surprises me. But that's good to hear.
I think noir stuff, it could very easily be seen as cheesy or maybe been there, done that. But this film, there's a lot of care into it and truly gorgeous looking settings.
Wow, okay.
Both in the circus and then, oddly enough, even when we get out of the visual feast that is the circus, going into more Art Deco stylings, really, really top notch. The Circus Noir, it really is cool as ice, though. It plays equal enjoyment in watching the magic of what's going on screen and understanding the con that is happening. That is where this story hits it, and where I'm coming very positive with this.
Okay.
It is throughout the entire film, we basically progress with Bradley Cooper through years of his life of in and out, almost effortlessly weaving in and out of the concept of being the audience member and getting conned by the magic, and then seeing behind the curtain, understanding the magic and understanding the con. Everyone is either in one of those two positions, either getting taken for a ride or doing the riding, basically.
Okay.
And it's wonderful how much this evolves to have Bradley basically take this setting, this starting setting of Circus Noir, and grow it into, frankly speaking, just a normal noir story, and still have the same through line of what the plot and what the story is about. It's are you a part of the con, or are you a victim of that then? So, and really enjoyable for that reason. Cooper as our lead, he starts this out very much as a blank slate. At first, my first notes was like, is he going to talk? And I was worried for a second, but it's very much intentional because the introduction to the circus, there's so much of a, no pun intended, a juggling act to it, and introducing weird concepts. I'm really glad Cooper has this blank slate approach, because in the story itself, he's learning his trade. He's learning the con from the people he's getting introduced to in the circus. He's very much, witnessing the con. He's the audience member,
okay.
And then slowly he builds that expertise to understand the cons of it.
So while you're along the ride with him, with Bradley, you're also getting kind of information dumps where you're also knowing more past him?
No. I would say, if anything, not at all, because it's very stream of conscious. We're kind of just in the viewpoint of either you're witnessing the magic, quote unquote,
right. You're the unseen man in the room. You are the cameraman. You're following.
Exactly.
You're there. Okay.
And you're following him as well when he finally understands what's actually going on behind scenes.
I see, okay.
How are they actually selling the magic?
Okay, you're really along the ride with him. Then.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're following Bradley through this film big time. Yeah.
Knowing some of Del Toro's work, I was expecting this to have a magical realism to it and actually have some sort of magic. But I think why this film is so great is that it never breaks from that all magic is a con, basically. And the enjoyment of that is so equal, because we're through Cooper's eyes, we get to experience a lot of the time what the audience was experiencing. So the brevity, the excitement to that on screen, and then there is always a return to enjoying it, of understanding what's actually going on, what's happening behind the scenes of how this actually works in real time. And very enjoyable for those two reasons, because you get to enjoy both sides.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you're revisiting it, but it's not a bore. It's actually engaging still.
Exactly.
That's very cool. And it's good that it keeps, how's the pacing? Like, it's 2.5 hours
It is a long one, yes.
But worth it. Like being there with Bradley and watching the character develop and him learning and then you learning and you revisiting things and finding new stuff out. Like it's a good ride to be on.
It is absolutely worth your time.
That's good to hear.
The full 2 hours and 30 because again, it's just able to explain the story is able to convey that sometimes you are either witnessing the magic or you are the con man here behind the magic. And that through line
It's pretty cool.
Not only has a palatability and excitement to see on screen, the fact that ties in through the entire film and really is the arc for our characters. Sometimes you're taken for a ride, sometimes you're doing the ride. That is where this movie is, excels from, wow, this is really solid, to something great. I really enjoyed it for that reason. And if anything, Tom, you know me. Folks at home, if you've been listening, it has been a minute since I praised any movie for its length. So the fact that a meaty 2 hour and 30 film, I think is absolutely worth every minute on screen.
It's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Now, Paul Thomas Anderson did really well last week.
True, very true.
You know what I mean? But yeah, it's been few and far between.
Few and far. Absolutely.
When you hit that 2.5 hour mark, you best have a good reason why.
Going back a little bit to Cooper, again, it starts as a blank slate, but I love how the carny life really forms him. And then when we finally get to the second half and him blossoming out in his own career, I think it's really great to watch because it's callbacks, but callbacks with substance to the lessons characters have taught him through the many characters in the carny side of this story. I think the length for that reason is a bit much because you're seeing a big arc, an evolution of what the lives of these characters become. But it really, as long as you like the pitch that is made within the first 20 to 30 minutes, you're going to be locked in for the rest of the movie. And I certainly was locked in for the rest of the movie with how much it delivers a great arc for Cooper as our lead, and really great stuff.
Okay, all right.
I think on closing notes, I remember watching Freaks, the 1930s movie, and not loving the real intensity there is to freak shows. I remember actually eating a stuffed pepper at the time while watching this, and I straight up lost my appetite because that was a movie that was actually banned for some time because of the real freak show portrayal.
Right.
I think what Del Toro has done to take that setting, make it fascinating, make it a little bit more palatable, a little bit more safe, but still have the intensity of that turn-of-the-century carny life, and craft this movie around it. It's that brutal nature that sells this movie. It's that dog-eat-dog. And once again, you can be saying, well, that's great that's all in the carny life, but what happens as we're getting to the second half of the film and we're not in that carny life? Once again, we have a yielding of these themes of a dog-eat-dog world, following our characters, following their progression, and are they getting taken for a ride or not? I think that is what lands this film for me, that evolution and that always the returning to those same concepts, but just higher stakes, more and more, really what lands this film from something I was very positive on to really something that I thought was great. We're going to go ahead and give Nightmare Alley an 80 on the dot.
Wow. Okay.
I thought it was a great movie.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. It's a shame that it's not doing very well in theaters.
Was this squashed between Spider-Man and
what the
Matrix?
hell?
I mean, I would say this is very poor handling of
the studio,
of the market. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is business. This is nuts and bolts stuff.
You cracked the 80 mark with this thing. I was not expecting it.
know.
If anything, if I saw an 80 coming up, I would have said like maybe Harry Met Sally or something like that. That's awesome. I love those surprises. I love those surprises, and also for your sake too. Like that's
worth
cool.
the runtime.
Right? No, 100%. Yeah. Very, very good.
Yeah, but give this movie some love, folks, because I can't stress how much. I mean, it really is a tragedy of the release schedule, and I mean, I had to jump through some hoops to see this in theaters and make sure it was in my kind of now playing for the podcast. Undoubtedly, by the time this gets released, when this is something that you can watch through streaming or at home, give it a chance. It is worth the runtime. Do not be scared by it, and be enthralled with the magic that really happens on screen.
Wow, that's awesome to hear. It's a great finish to this podcast as well. Nightmare Alley, really good at an 80%. Mm-hmm. Vin, is there anything else you'd like to add, or are we rolling credits here?
I think we are good to go.
Okay. Well, Vin, we thank you for stopping by, and for folks, we're just going to run things down one more time here. We have When Harry Met Sally with a 74%, Memories of a Murder with a 76%, Nobody with a 62%, Belle with a 46%, and Nightmare Alley with an 80%. We thank you so much, folks, for stopping by and giving us a listen, and we will see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating, or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the Donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from us. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.